don't know historically that managers really cared about developing their people. And the only way that we can really grow and develop our people is if we're willing to talk about their strengths and how to leverage those and advance those and take those to the next level, and also acknowledge where they have weaknesses or where things went bump and be straightforward about it and caring about it and help them learn and overcome those, gain new skills, or shift their responsibilities so they don't have to do things that they're not naturally inclined to do or not interested in getting better at.
TDW fans, we are excited to have Mamie Kanfer Stewart on the show today. She is the founder of Meeteor, a coaching and training firm focused on healthy, high-performing teams with a special emphasis on productive meetings. She's also the author of Momentum, Creating Effective, Engaging, and Enjoyable Meetings, and the host of the Modern Manager podcast, which is awesome, and you should check it out. Mamie, welcome to TDW.
Thank you so much for having me today. I'm really excited to chat with you both.
We are excited to have you on the show. Presently, our sense is that there is a great divide between employers and employees, and that workers are less engaged than ever. And this has been ongoing since the pandemic and covered by quiet quitting, the Great Resignation, et cetera. And there's this recent survey by Talker Research of 2,000 Americans, which showed that 38% of Americans have never felt more uninspired at work. So what is your take from the front lines, working with leaders and professionals? Is the gap between these groups and the disengagement at work as profound and as pervasive as it seems?
Look, I'm not a researcher, so I can only speak from the conversations I have, right? But what I'm seeing is that during the pandemic, so many people started rethinking their lives, wanting to find more meaning, have more space for the things that they love. And that trend has really carried forward into the last couple of years when we come out of the pandemic. And now people are like, okay, so like I spend all this time at work and I'm not engaged. And I don't necessarily want to have to go find a whole new job because that's a lot of work and the market goes up and down in terms of how easy it is. I don't necessarily want to go into the gig economy. I don't necessarily want to consult. I don't want to necessarily have all that insecurity, but I'm working from home more. I'm not connected to my team members. My company might not be so exciting. Like we're kind of in this like stuck moment where people kind of feel like we still haven't figured out the whole hybrid. How do we work globally, remotely, work from anywhere? I don't really want to go back into the office, but I'm also kind of lonely. So there's just a lot going on coming out of the pandemic that we haven't yet resolved. And I think people are really feeling it.
Yeah, I think that's our sense as well. I keep hearing countless stories of people really pushing back on wanting to go to the office, of leaders who are just having so much trouble wrangling their teams and figuring out, do I use the carrot or do I use the stick? Like, how do I figure this out? And just feeling, I think leaders are feeling just as stuck as employees and professionals are. And I think that's also what makes your work and your insights so fascinating, because you're working with managers, which play this kind of critical role in some organizations of being the glue or being the spokespeople, for the professionals up to, the leadership layer. So I'm curious, you call managers the true heroes of the workplace. They have an outsized impact on their team and their connection to the organization. So what must managers do differently now to inspire more engagement from their employees?
Well, first of all, managers play the outsized impact, and I call them the unsung heroes because they're the people that enable everything else to happen, right? Like employees need someone to help guide them, to support them, to grow them, to give them feedback and direction and inspiration and motivation and appreciation, right? And that's what managers are there to do, and to translate the strategy and the goals of the organization coming from leadership down to the people who are actually going to get the work done. And so managers in general are just not appreciated enough for this unique role that they're playing. In terms of what that means then for their team members, right? The job of the manager has gotten harder and harder, right? We basically became anyone who was in a management position became a virtual team practically overnight. And already we don't support managers enough with the professional development to build the skills they need to lead strong, healthy, thriving teams. And then we just made it a whole lot harder because we asked them to do the things that they were already struggling with. But now, in the context of a pandemic, managing a virtual team, while many of them also had family members at home that they were caring for and dealing with all the scariness of the health and the world and all the things that come with it, right? So where we're at now is that managers still need to do all those things, right? They need to give their people clarity and direction. They need to support their people to grow. They need to help people find meaning in their work. And that doesn't mean that every single task has to be meaningful, but they have to help their people connect what's important to an individual, to what's important to the team, to what's important to the company, and what's important to their customers. They need to help people draw that line so that they feel like what I'm doing every single day, how I'm spending my time, makes a difference. And they need to help their people feel appreciated. And so that people understand not just what I'm doing matters, but I'm being seen and valued for who I am and the way that I'm contributing to our success. And those aren't new. Those things have been parts of a manager's job for a very long time.
Yes.
We just haven't really talked about it that way. And we haven't supported managers to be able to do those things. And now they're just trying to find new ways to do that because you're having to do it at a distance. You have to do it when you have maybe fewer team members than you're used to, or your job has expanded and what you're responsible for is more. So it just is more complicated, but it's really the same things that we've always been asking managers to do.
I think that's interesting because while you said it's been around for a long time, and I agree with that, I think there are some managers who excel at making those connections, connect who you are, what you stand for back to the organization, my values, my purpose, my mission, whatever you connect. And then there's the connect to the customer, the connect to the strategy, connect to the strategic initiatives that are most relevant for this team. And it sounds easy, kind of rolls off the tongue, but I think in practice, there are some leaders who really shine at that, and a lot of them who don't shine at that.
Mm-hmm. Is true. And part of that is because we expect managers to be able to do all these things without actually helping them grow those skills, right? We expect managers, my kind of pet peeve around meetings, right? We expect people to know how to run meetings just because you've been to a meeting before and suddenly, of course, you know how to run meetings. Learning how to run a meeting is actually something that people can be taught. And when you know what you're supposed to do and why you're supposed to do things in those ways, it's not hard. And it's the same thing with so many different parts of being a manager. You get promoted because you were good at doing the job, not because you had some, magical insight around how to lead a team.
Right.
And you get put into a position and then it's a little overwhelming and you're trying to figure it out. And your company may or may not be giving you professional development dollars. They may or may not give you a coach. They may not give you resources and support. And if you don't have a good manager, and sadly, so many people I talk to have said they've never really had a good manager, you don't have someone to role model after.
Yeah.
So it's a tough thing we ask people to do. And it's not, we need to stop thinking that it's something that people just automatically, you're a manager, you're a people person, or you're not. No, these are just skills. Just like anything else, we can develop them with the right support and the right resources.
So let me ask this. What I'm hearing is, starting point, this job is already hard. You were excelling at doing something, and now you have to excel at doing that thing and manage other people. And now you've gone through the global pandemic, and it's plus, 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 plus on the responsibility scale in terms of what you're dealing with. And we're exploring with you and validating that people are feeling listless, they're feeling disengaged, and they need more. And this management layer is already spread thin. So from your perspective, what is it that they need in order to do this job better and actually step up into that inspirational call that Nate's kind of talking about, that next level of making people feel seen, heard, valued, and integral to the, organizational DNA?
Yeah. So I'm going to divide this into two pieces. So the first is that companies need to invest in their managers gaining management skills, right? It's one thing to be like, well, we need you to learn Excel, so we're going to pay for you to learn this Excel course thing, right? It's another thing to say, you need to learn how to communicate better or how to give feedback or how to run meetings. And so we're going to get you a coach or we're going to sign you up for a course on that. So companies need to invest in managers developing those management skills. They need to give them opportunities and resources. The second is what managers need to then do for their people, right? Managers need to show a lot more appreciation. And that doesn't mean like being untrue. And it doesn't mean saying thank you and good job. It actually means showing authentic appreciation. And some people are naturally good at pointing out, you were so, articulate during that meeting. The way that you described XYZ really seemed to resonate with folks. Like that was really well done. Other people think that in their head, and I will say, like, this is me. I'll think that in my head, and then I don't say anything, right?
Yeah.
And so for me, part of it was learning to get comfortable expressing that appreciation and writing a note to a team member afterwards, especially if it's a virtual meeting. And so I couldn't just kind of say it on our way out the door. But taking a minute to write it on Slack and let them know that I noticed that and I appreciated that, right? So some of us do it internally, we just don't externalize it. And then for other folks, right, we're moving 1,000 miles a minute in our own heads and we don't even pause to say, wait a second, what can I say thank you for? What can I point out that both will help this person feel really appreciated and seen and will also help them reinforce the things that they're doing well so that they'll keep doing them? Because there's actually a business case to keep showing appreciation too, right? So depending on where you are, what your innate kind of sense is, you can kind of figure out, what do you need to do? Do you need to make a little sticky note on your computer that says, remember to show appreciation today? Do you need to put a little calendar reminder, which I have done in the past? Every Thursday, I call Thank You Thursdays. I put a little task on my to-do list as a recurring task that I need to say thank you to at least one person on my team for something. And then I just think back over the week, what can I point out that I want to show some appreciation for, right? So that's just one of the things that managers can do and get better at showing specific, real, genuine appreciation and thanks to their team members. And that, no one dislikes being thanked, right? No one dislikes it. No one feels bad when they get a compliment. So just the little things can go so far, right?
Yeah. Keep it coming. Keep it coming. Keep it coming. Let's stay with skills for a second. You advocate for a modern approach to management. And as Alex said, there's a lot that's changed over the last 4 years. This development that you're talking about we're kind of moving away from pedigree. We're kind of moving away from resume, and we're really centering in the workforce on skills. So what are some of these core skills that are the most critical now for managers?
I'm really glad that we're moving away from degrees and pedigrees and all that stuff. Like, I went to business school and I don't think I learned anything about people management, to be fair. I mean, I loved everything. I loved the experience. I love what I learned, but like, it wasn't really the best way to learn how to manage people. So I'm really happy that we're focusing more and more on skills. So I think another skill is giving feedback in a way that is effective, where the person can really hear it without feeling terrible about that experience and can take action on it. And it's another place that I think managers struggle with for a variety of different reasons, right? Some people, they want their team to love them, and some people are conflict avoidant, and some people just get really nervous when they have to they worry about how one's going to respond. Like, it just becomes a very complicated situation. But there's a process to giving feedback, and there are things to do and things not to do to give feedback to someone in a way that they can really hear it, and they can make it actionable, and it can be a positive experience. And I'm happy to share more of the specifics about, but that's one of those things that I don't know historically that managers really cared about developing their people. And the only way that we can really grow and develop our people is if we're willing to talk about their strengths and how to leverage those and advance those and take those to the next level, and also acknowledge where they have weaknesses or where things went bump, and be straightforward about it and caring about it and help them learn and overcome those, gain new skills, or shift their responsibilities so they don't have to do things that they're not naturally inclined to do or not interested in getting better at.
hmm So Alex and I have been in the workforce for decades, and I know we look younger than we are. And what we found is that there's a lot of emphasis, as you said, around a more human approach, a more human-centered approach, a thoughtful approach, an empathetic approach, a vulnerable
Mhm.
psychological safety.
Yes.
These terms that
Yes.
we just didn't have in those early years. And what you just said really sticks out to me as I look back at my career, and I'm like, there were a lot of managers who had no skill around people development, what you said, developing
Hmm.
people. So they were great at managing a task or a budget or a process or a project or whatever. But when it came to how do you actually have conversations with people and help them become the next best version of themselves, nothing, nothing there. Is that getting better finally? It seems to be.
It's starting to, right? If we go back to kind of what is a manager's job, right? Managers' jobs historically were framed as get the work done, right? That's the task focus, the project focus, the goal orientation. Now, if we think about a manager's job as support the people who get the work done. And that automatically means that we need to help our team members be the best version of themselves because that's how the work gets done.
Right.
It's not just controlling these individual units and moving them around and then suddenly we hit a goal. It's the people, right? It's all about the people who are going to do the work. So developing them is going to make the difference for your team, for your organization, and ultimately for you as a manager because that's how you get to be appreciated because you hit a goal, your team hit a goal.
It's such a big shift because what you're talking about is going from how do we optimize the machine to how do we lift the people up. And
Mm.
that's
Mhm.
a really, really big shift. As someone who is divorced and remarried, I think one day I'm going to write a book and the title of it's going to be Everything I Ever Learned Was in Couples Therapy. And related to what you're talking about, what I think is such a superpower that I have learned in couples therapy that I think is very apt for the skill of management. And I want to just kind of play with this with you for a second is the difference between a criticism and a complaint. And a criticism is you attack somebody's character. You know, you did
Mm.
this and you always do this, and this is based on, you know, how you are in the world, and you're fundamentally attacking their character because some core value of yours was violated and you're upset about it. A complaint is very different. So criticism, like, you know, if your partner, this is a bit of a trope, but you know, you didn't do the dishes last night. Could be me, could be my wife. I do dishes too. I just want to put that out there. um, you know, you said you would do the dishes, Alex. You know, you're so lazy. You never follow through. I can never count on you for anything. What's wrong with you? That's criticism. That'd be
Mhm.
really mean. My wife has never said that to me, by the way. But a complaint is, hey, Alex, you said you would do the dishes last night. You know, it's important for me to wake up to a clean kitchen. It's kind of how I like to start my day. Can you tell me when you're going to get to that? Great. And next time, if there is a delay or some reason you can't do it, can you give me a heads up and just tell me why and when to expect it will be done? Like, that's a big shift in how you give feedback because it's very specific and it's dictating a clear preference of what you would like instead. Do you see this kind of communication skills training coming more and more into the management field? Because you're talking a lot about how to lift people up initially. You were talking about how do you express gratitude? How do you kind of reinforce what people are doing well? And I think that's absolutely critical. A lot of people don't know how to take any sort of feedback constructively. Like, we call it constructive
Mhm.
feedback, but many people don't feel like it's constructive at all. So I'm just, you know, kind of curious to play with that with you.
Yeah, exactly what you're talking. That's exactly what I teach. And I actually want to break apart a little bit of what you were saying in the way that you were describing the complaint because already it had more embedded in it than what a lot of people do, right? A lot of
Hmm.
people will say, you said you were going to do the dishes, they weren't done, right? And then it's maybe a like, why didn't they get done? What happened? Right? And you didn't even say that. You went straight to, can you just let me know when it will be done? Right? Like that already is a big shift. And we I do see managers and I do see some trainings and some folks who are really trying to look at the best way to give feedback, because when we trigger that amygdala that happens when people get defensive and they either like shut down or they get angry, right? At that point, no one can hear the feedback that you're giving them, even if it's constructive. They can't hear it. And that's not what we want. And as soon as we start the feedback conversation, I always tell my clients, like, do not ever say, can I give you some feedback? That to me is the worst advice. And so many coaches recommend before you give someone feedback, you should ask them permission. They give you feedback. No, as soon as you say the word feedback, that person automatically, their hairs go up and they instantly get into defensive mode. Just stop doing that. Right. So what I tell folks is say like, hey, can I talk to you about the dishes? Right? Can I chat with you about this thing? And that's a permission enough. You're giving them enough of a sense of what the topic is that you're not just like, can I talk to you? Because that also can create some like, what do you need to talk to me about? Now I'm really nervous. Why do you need to talk to me? Right? Can I talk to you about this thing? Sure. No problem. Okay. So, right. I was expecting you to do the dishes. It's not what happened. When can I expect to get done? Right? Easy peasy.
Yeah.
It's okay to also say, I was expecting this thing. I'm wondering what got in the way. Was there something that happened? Is there something I could do differently? That's my other favorite one. What can I do differently to make sure that this, especially as a manager, what can I do differently to make sure that your plate is not too full? Or as a parent, right? What could I do differently last night to make sure that you had the time to do that? Did you need me to do bedtime in the future? Please ask me to do bedtime if you need me to, so that you can do the dishes, right? If it's your night, whatever it might be. But opening it up in a way that says, this is a shared problem, and we're focused on how we can prevent this from happening in the future in a way that's not about placing blame on the past. It's not about criticizing you, as you said. It's not because I'm saying you're lazy, and it's not about the impact on me.
I love that answer so much. It's great. It's really great. If I didn't do the dishes, it's probably because I was still hungry and I just thought, hey, I want to leave all these plates out because who knows what I'm going to eat before bed or in the middle of the night. I mean, I have no idea.
I want to say one other thing. I love your book concept. And I have a previous podcast series that I did called Parenting Your Business, because it was the same way for me. I was finding that all the things I was learning about parenting were applicable in the workplace, and all the things I was learning about the workplace were applicable in parenting. So there's such a connection. So I really encourage people, if you're learning about one domain or the other, try bringing those skills into the other, because it's really, really helpful. And it just gives us more opportunity to practice these skills. And usually that's a good thing. Usually it's helpful, and you get surprised by how nice your relationships will develop when you're applying these same skills in all parts of your life.
I tie all of that back to your skill building initiative and concept of, if you can pick up skills in different domains, I call it a mashup, when you start to bring those skills over from another domain. And Alex, you said therapy. Well, in the past, you would never say that. You would never say therapy as something that's going on to help you be a better leader. And now we've entered a world where I'm going to therapy at 2, you're going at 4, and we are bringing these skills back into the workplace. So 100% agree with you. And that is a cool way to get those discrete skills from a non-traditional place.
One more skill we wanted to ask you about, and this is a little bit future forward, and perhaps just your hot take on this, because we could spend a lot of time here. But we're looking out and we're saying, man, managers are going to now have to start managing this increasingly human plus AI workforce, more specifically AI-powered robots and tools. How do we even begin to prepare managers for that?
It's a lot. And I just did a podcast episode on AI tools that managers should be using. So I'm like deep in this right now. I have no idea about robots. I'll just be really clear. Like, I am not ready for a world where there are bots that I have to manage. So I'm just going to throw that out that, hopefully that's not coming around the corner too soon. But in terms of AI, that is something that managers should be taking advantage of right now. And it's something that more and more businesses are bringing in. They're mostly bringing it in around like supply chain and potentially around like marketing and writing, generative writing tools and things like that. But there's a lot of other spaces where AI is coming up, and managers should be on top of this. It's one of the ways that we can add more value by finding the right tools that help us connect better with our people, that help our people do their work, help us all stay on the same page in terms of our project management and all those different pieces. So I don't know that I have any brilliant insights other than to say, just like the skills, right? Using AI, using any software, it's something that managers need to figure out, get support, right? Talk to your team members about what's possible, what they need. Talk to your organization about what kinds of tools you have access to and what's potentially available that would meet their cybersecurity standards and privacy standards. And make this a part of your job to go out and figure out what are the right tools and how to bring them in. The one really important piece here, and this is true of all software, is it's never about the tool. It's always about the human behavior. And I have a client I'm working with right now who's trying to get their team onto a shared task system. And it's hard because everybody has a different work style. Some people really like their pen and paper. Some people are super comfortable with keeping every little detailed thing in a task system, and they get really annoyed when someone else doesn't check off the thing as soon as it's done so that it triggers them to do their task that they've been blocked by. And so then 3 hours later, they go by and they're texting and they're like, why, have you gotten that thing done? They're, oh yeah, I just forgot to check it off, right? Like, it's complicated and it all comes down to behaviors. So with AI tools, it's no different. It really comes down to how managers and their team members develop the habits, the rituals, the skills, the routines to use those tools so that we can get the benefit of them. Because if we're not using them well and we're not using our critical thinking to engage properly with these tools, it can be more work and more problems than it's ultimately worth. But we got to figure it out and we got to get there. And it's one of the things I love working with teams on is how to figure out how to develop those human skills and the habits and the routines to bring those tools in so that everybody's work just gets elevated.
So just one more second on this. I know Nate is really eager to ask you some important questions about your focus on meetings and unlock all of that wisdom from you. But just staying with AI for a second longer. And of course, we are going to talk about our use of AI note-taking in meetings, which we're very excited to share with the audience as well. But are there any key tools for managers that we should be aware of that you'd like to kind of share and highlight, in this conversation right now?
You just dropped that video on YouTube, right?
Yes, exactly. It's my newest episode. So I'll mention two that I talk about in that episode. So the first are task generators. These are new or new-ish, and I think they're being built into more and more collaborative task managers and project managers. But there are some really cool tools where you put in the task you have to do, click a button, and then it tells you a list of all the steps that it thinks you need to do to get that task done.
Wow.
So it just takes up something that might feel overwhelming and breaks it down. Or if you have a team member who's never had to do this task before, it gives them a starting point to figure out what the next steps are. And so many people procrastinate when they feel either like a task is too big and they just don't know what to do, or they don't know where to start. And they're like, I know the things I kind of got to do, but I'm not sure where to start. So having a tool like that where you can just, this is what I have to do. I need to publish, I need to launch a podcast. What am I supposed to do for that? Right? I could go read a bunch of blog articles and try to figure it out, watch some YouTube videos on people, or I can launch a podcast into his task generator and get a whole project plan. And then I can take one of those tasks and put it in, and it'll break it down even farther. So I love this to just speed the project planning process. But again, you also have to use your critical thinking skills and look at it and then figure out, are these the right things? Is this the right order? What's missing? Okay, so that's one. The other one,
Hold on. What's the name of that tool?
Oh, yes. Okay, so one is called Magic to Do. It's by a company called Goblin Tools. They make specific tools for people who are neurodivergent. And so they have a number of different tools that try to take something that would seem pretty easy for most neurotypicals and help people who are neurodivergent do that one simple task. And I have a daughter who has some executive functioning challenges. And so it's been a super helpful tool for her and some of her homework management and things to be able to go in and use this tool. So highly recommend. And then there are some tools like, I think it's AnyDo or Todoist. I can't remember exactly which one, but they're building it in. I think Asana now has it is beta testing, having it built in. So I would expect that over the next couple of months, we'll see more and more task manager systems building it in where you just put in your main task, click, and it'll create subtasks for you automatically.
Thank you, AI. because that kind of stuff, that really rote detail managing of those processes is very, I think, cumbersome for all of us. I know there are some people who love it, but I think for a lot of us, it feels kind of rote and painful. And AI is going to come to our rescue on that. So I'm super excited about that.
For the sake of time, I'll skip my second, and you'll just have to go check out my YouTube video, and you'll see the other ones. Okay, let's keep going.
I'll give you the title: 4 AI tools for modern managers to skyrocket your productivity. Check it out. Okay, let's talk meetings. Again, Alex and I have been in the workforce for a long time. We've been in some very big companies, and we've been in small companies and startups and everything in between, including the disrupted workforce. Meetings are an omnipresent pain point. And in most organizations, you will hear someone say, well, no surprise, the employee survey came back. Guess what? Got an awful rating again this year. Meetings. What is going on? Why do meetings suck so bad inside of companies? And what is the number one reason for this persistent problem?
Meetings are a problem for many reasons, but trying to keep it a little simple here. So first is we assume we should know how to run meetings. I talk to a lot of people about their meetings. I have yet to have anyone say, oh my gosh, I'm a terrible meeting leader. The meeting I led earlier, it was such a waste of everyone's time. No one says that. As soon as I ask someone about their meetings, inevitably they say, oh my gosh, I went to this meeting that someone, XYZ person over in finance led, and it was so awful. And oh my gosh, my boss's meetings, they just are terrible. We don't realize as meeting leaders that our meetings are not serving our participants. We've basically designed the meeting, whether we've done it on paper or just in our heads, we've designed it for us. We know what we're trying to get done. And so most of the time, we are getting something out of that meeting. Otherwise, we would do it differently. So that's part of the problem is we're not really thinking holistically as a meeting leader about how to optimize for everyone's participation and make sure that the meeting is actually a good use of time for everyone who's there. So that's part of it, is we just don't realize. The second part is we don't think it's a skill you need to learn, right? I talked about this earlier. We just assume people should be good at it, but actually, no, we actually need to learn, and there are best practices. And then I would say the third piece about it is that we were never really, and I guess this gets into the skills, we were never really taught how to think about meetings and like why meetings, what they're useful for. So we default to meetings for a lot of stuff because for a long time, a meeting was just how work happened, right? 50 years ago, that's just what happened. We had meetings. You weren't emailing people. You weren't texting them. You were having a meeting when you had to talk about something or make a decision. And the kind of bad habits have just kind of rolled with us. And so now we need to do something. Let's have a meeting. We say it's like the hammer that tries to deal with all the different problems, right? Oh, it's a nail. Great. Everything can be a nail. It's a screw. That's okay. It can be a nail. But that's not how meetings are. Meetings have a particular focus of what they're good for. And then we have other collaboration tools, other forms of communication that are best for other things. And we haven't quite figured out how to put together our communication suite or our collaboration suite in a way that optimizes each one. And so meetings end up kind of being a default that are a big waste of time for a lot of folks.
I mean, that led to, I think, the omnipresent meme that we've all seen, like this meeting could have been an email, right? We've all seen that.
And I want to ask you a question about calculation, Mamie. So what's funny is people go, wow, that was such a waste. Why did we do that? But nobody really calculates the waste of a meeting. And for example, let's say you have between $120,000 and $150,000 salaries in a room, and let's say there's 6 people, and you're wasting between $500 and $1,000 for every meeting you have of those people sitting around that table, or more, depending on how many people are all logged in. And I think it's just really interesting when you start to go, how much money are we basically lighting on fire every time we come in and have this meeting?
Yeah. Well, we don't think of anything that way, right? We don't think about it as I'm paying for that meeting because we don't think about it as I'm paying for that person to write that document, right? It's just salaries. If you actually did an experiment and said, every time we have a meeting, it's going to cost us X amount of dollars, is it worth it? Or should we do something else? You might start to shift that mindset, but it's just not how we think about work in the office. But I think there's another piece of the meeting calculation that teams don't always think about, which is the cost in time compared to the contributions in time. So try this with me for a second, right? Let's take a 30-minute meeting. Let's assume there's 5 people there. We have, 2-3 minutes or so of people entering into the room, whether it's physically or getting online. Then we have, let's say, 2, 3, 4, 5 minutes at the end of the meeting of wrapping up, making sure we're all on the same page. We know what the next steps are, right? Which maybe they're being generated by the team, or maybe you're looking at an AI generated summary and confirming, yes, these are the next steps. Yes, everybody knows what they're responsible for. But either way, let's just say you're losing in total 5 minutes on either end of the meeting. Now you have 25 minutes of quality meeting time. With 5 people, divided equally, that means you get 5 minutes of their brain share. 5 minutes. It took them 30 minutes of their time, but you got 5 minutes of their thinking.
Yeah.
Now, sometimes that's okay because you needed them to hear the rest of the conversation. But sometimes that's a real waste of time.
Mm.
And there are other ways that we can get 5 minutes of someone's time and 5 minutes of their brain share, or 10 minutes of their time and 5 minutes of their brain share and 5 minutes of their listening. That's just way more optimized than everybody sitting there for an entire meeting that's not really engaging them. It's not really worth their brain power or their participation.
Yeah. I'm going to ask one other bigger picture question on this. It's one thing as a leader, as a manager, to get better at how you run meetings. That's the whole scope, pre, during, and post. I'm going to get better at this discrete skill. How about across an enterprise? When you have meetings at scale that aren't good, is there an approach for an organization to start a conversation around that and say, hey, we're really struggling with meetings and there's a tremendous amount of waste. People are dissatisfied. It's not working. We're not getting the kind of results that we need. How would you even start that conversation?
Oh my gosh. I mean, I feel like if I had the answer to that, I'd be a bajillionaire.
That's what I'm saying.
But here's what I'll say, right? Just like anything else in your culture, to me, meetings are not just a practice or a productivity tool. They're actually a part of your culture. And so just like you might say, wow, we need to do something around our diversity, equity, and inclusion, or we need to do something around our company values, or we need to do something around how we are managing against goals, right? That's part of our culture. We can do something about our meetings in a way that's tied to our culture. And the number one thing that organizations can do, and anyone can do this, any single manager, but also you don't even have to be a meeting leader. A participant can even do this. You can start the revolution as a participant in a meeting, is to ask the question, what are we trying to achieve in today's meeting? As soon as you shift from why are we having this meeting to discuss, to review, to unpack, to reflect, to whatever, to inform, right? When we get out of the verbs of what we're trying to do in meetings, and instead we focus on the outcome. Well, at the end of this meeting, we're going to have made a decision. At the end of this meeting, we're going to have a finished document that we can send off to the client. At the end of this meeting, we're going to have clear next steps for how we're going to go out and execute on that plan. When you focus on the outcome, it totally shifts what happens in the meeting because people now are driving towards that same North Star. It becomes much clearer who needs to be in the meeting to get to that outcome. And you can start to stop having meetings where you go, well, I don't know. What's the outcome of this reflection? What are we trying to achieve right now? Are we just talking to talk? Are we just sharing information to share? Like, what is the outcome? And that can start to shift from having meetings that kind of feel like, well, not sure why we did that, or that could have been an email because it was just information sharing, to that was really a productive use of our time. And we now can build momentum to keep our work moving forward.
And it also helps you determine how long should the meeting be and all sorts of other aspects of, does this need to be in a war room with a whiteboard? Can we do this virtually? That question about outcomes is a really rich way to kind of reframe how are we going to do this much more purposefully and thoughtfully.
Yes. And once you start getting to that mindset that meetings aren't just something that happen, they're something that are designed and that you then have to facilitate and follow through on, you can start to say, all right, we can do so much more than just talk in a meeting, right? We can design activities into our meeting where we're getting people to put sticky notes on the board in real life or on a virtual board if we're meeting virtually. We can have people brainstorm ahead of time and then come in and start doing the processing of those brainstorms. We can use live polling and we can do mind mapping and we can do all different kinds of facilitated activities that get people more engaged,
Mm-hmm.
get more of their brain share into the room, that bring out stuff and start to break down things around introverts and extroverts and power dynamics and reasons why people don't feel psychologically safe because you can use anonymous tools, right? We can actually take advantage of all of this other stuff that help people contribute more, feel more engaged, feel more comfortable about sharing what they're really thinking, which ultimately just serves everybody. So when we stop thinking about meetings as something that just happened, that we just have a conversation and then done, and instead say, no, I need to plan this. I need to figure out what we're trying to achieve, what we should be doing to get to that outcome, who needs to be there to get to that outcome, and how much time we really need. It's just a game changer. And what I have seen is as teams start to take on these practices, they don't want to just go to meetings that are randomly planned.
Bad
They
meetings, yes.
actually want to be in good meetings, right? They want to
Yes.
know, how should I prepare? Send me information ahead of time so I can be ready to go into that conversation. I don't want to sit and listen to a presentation for 15 minutes that I could have read in 5 minutes on my own. So it becomes a positive reinforcement once you start developing those practices.
We've come full circle. So we said, what are the discrete skills that a modern manager would have? And very clearly, it's run great meetings. Stop with the monkey see, monkey do. I didn't have a good manager. I'm not sure what I'm doing here. And go get that discrete skill so you can give that gift not only to your team, but across the organization, hopefully influence others to follow your lead. So thank you for that.
I also want to give just a very quick plug for the efficacy of AI tools in meetings. So Nate and I have been using Fathom over Zoom, and it has been such a game changer for us because it is 99% better than all human note takers. It's capturing the video, the full transcript, the highlights, the insights, the key to-dos, all of those things. And I think one of the greatest benefits, for me as someone who's mildly on the ADD spectrum, is instead of having to look down and think about what notes am I missing, I can drop in and be fully present and know that whatever was captured, I can go back and grab that later. And I think that is really, really powerful. So I'm glad that we're talking about, AI as productivity tools, because I think it's, one of the starting points of this conversation is just how overwhelmed managers are. And
Yeah.
so, of course, there is that resistance to, oh my gosh, we have to learn another tool. We have to lean into something else, but not quite realizing just how powerful these can be in making your job easier and creating, less of that productivity friction that we all feel.
Yes. And the truth is that managers weren't always taking meeting notes in the past, right? Like
Yeah.
that was one of the big things that I was preaching for a long time, was the best way to take meeting notes. And it's not to assign a note taker, and it's not to make you have to do it as the manager. Like we were never good at this. And the reality is also our meeting notes, even if we did take them, they lived in our own personal journal. Maybe
Yes.
they were in a Google Doc somewhere and no one ever
Yes.
looked at them, right? So these new tools like Fathom, they are fabulous because they're doing something that nobody wanted to do before, but was
Yeah.
actually a huge part of making your meetings ultimately effective, and so much more. So I am also a very big fan. I do want to share a quick story too. So when I started Meteor in 2015-ish, someone came to me and they're like, I have a tool that records your meeting and then gives you a transcript. And also you can say the keyword and it'll then pull that 30 seconds beforehand out. So if there's something you want to highlight or a task, whatever, you can just say the keyword in the meeting, and then the system will know to flag that part in the transcript. And but nobody wants to use it. I'm like, interesting. Why does no one want to use this? Well, nobody wants to be recorded. Nobody wants
Yeah.
to have what they said thrown back at them because they said something that was a bad idea. and they were advocating for an idea that turned out to be a huge failure. So nobody's willing to have their meetings recorded. That was like 10 years ago, right? Now we're recorded all the freaking time, right?
All
Like
the
we're in
time.
so many meetings where we're
Yeah.
recorded and no one is worried about any of that.
Yeah.
So there's a little bit of this human resistance piece that like we will get over. I imagine that there will be a time in the not too distant future where we will all be using all kinds of tools that at this moment we can't fathom that we could use, right? We couldn't even imagine that we would be using these tools, that onboarding to them, figuring out the behaviors, getting our team members excited about them. But we will get there. And so it's just a matter of taking those baby steps, and tools that can integrate seamlessly, go for it, right? Those are the easiest ones to take. Just talk to your team about it so that everybody knows what's happening, and then go for it, right?
Yeah.
And slowly build up your AI and your tool muscles over time.
There's something really powerful too about showing the tool. I was with a client a while back, and the client goes, "Are you recording this meeting? I see your AI note taker in there." I go, "Yeah, it's the best thing that ever happened to me." At the end of the meeting, the person says, "Can I see that?" And I bring it up on the screen, and they were like, just like, this is, it recorded everything in video, in transcript. It broke out highlights. It broke out to-dos. And it was instantly shareable to all these. And the person said to me, "You have no idea how much time this would save when you have 5, 6, 10 people in a meeting and they all took different notes. And then you have to go back and spend the time to rationalize those notes." It's just such a cool breakthrough for all of us. And Alex and I are really excited about that. I'm going to share one last thing that I think is going to be the nerdiest breakthrough of all on that, is when we have embedded AI either in an appendage that's on us or in glasses or in an earpiece or in our phones or whatever, and it records all of what we say, and it allows you to reflect on all the moments. And I know how creepy that sounds, but that is totally doable in the world that we're headed into. So one quick thing about meetings, and this is so simple but so important and kind of hard, is when you're in a meeting, it goes beyond productivity to create connection. You can have a meeting that just gets a result, or you can have a meeting, and you say it in the way you talk about your firm, a healthy meeting that builds culture, that builds people up. And so I just wanted you to share a little bit about the difference between, we just got stuff done versus we had a healthy meeting that was generative for these people.
Yeah. So part of that is the way that we think about relationship building in meetings, especially when we are not co-located anymore. We don't have a good practice of intentionally using meetings, especially virtual meetings, for relationship building, right? If you have an in-person meeting, you sit down, you chit chat with people as you're kind of waiting for folks to come in. Maybe you chat with people on the way out in the hallway. And so you're kind of almost by default creating these little human moments amongst your team members. If you've ever tried to chit chat with a Zoom meeting that has 6 people in it, 2 people can have a conversation and then 4 people are observing the 2 people having the conversation. It's so awkward. It does not fit, just the tool does not lend itself to that kind of warm, chit-chatty relationship building piece as you're waiting for the meeting to start. So when it comes to the relationship side, teams need to rethink how they're building relationships in general. Because if your meetings are really task focused, then you're not building relationships in those meetings. And you can't rely on the natural, organic touches that are happening because you're not in person. So some of that means you need to be more intentional about having one-on-one time with each of your team members where you don't have an agenda. That is just I want to check in and see how you're going. Sometimes it's building that into the start of your meetings. Sometimes it's creating opportunities as a team to do things during a meeting that is more on the human side. So having a check-in where each person goes around and just shares, what's one important thing going on in your life right now? What book are you reading right now? What podcast have you listened to, or what movie have you watched that, has you all jazzed up? Whatever it might be, to just create more opportunities for people in meetings to connect. So that's the human connection side. The other part of it is just the general engagement side and recognizing that different people have different ways of engaging. And some people, they are extrovert. They talk out loud. They talk to think. They are jumping in and taking up a lot of space, and meetings feel really comfortable for them. And they feel great coming out of a meeting when they've been engaged. And other people, like, they need time to process, and they're going to be quieter in a meeting. And a meeting may or may not be the best way for them to really feel part of the team and engaged and collaborative. And so you need to talk to each of your team members about what feels best for them. How do they want to be engaged? How do they feel part of the team? And you'll discover what works for each person. This is a little different, but I think it's important. So if I like the Myers-Briggs assessment, and I just like it as a way to help us understand how different we all are and how those differences show up in the workplace. And it's not to say anything's good or bad, and it's definitely not like any kind of assessment that is necessarily grounded in some deep science. I just find it to be a useful tool. So there's a spectrum called thinkers and feelers. And the person who taught me about this, or the company that taught me about this, they use the metaphor of a bucket. That if you are a thinker, it's like you have a solid wooden bucket. And every time you have a positive interaction with someone, they're putting a drop in your bucket. And because that bucket is so solid, that years could go by and that drop is still there. And the next time you see them, you still have that drop. And it feels like no time has gone by at all. And that relationship is as strong as ever. Feelers have the same bucket, but it has holes all over the bottom. And so you put a drop in, and that drop might last a day, maybe a week. But if you don't keep putting drops in that bucket, the next time you see that person, they're going to be like, they're going to feel so cold from you. They're going to feel like you have no relationship at all. So different people also feel differently about these relationships based on your personality type. And it's not to say you have to figure out who's a thinker and who's a feeler, but just know that for some people, if they only talk to you once a week, that's fine. They are perfectly happy with that. And for other people, if they talk to you once a week, they feel so disconnected, so lonely, so unappreciated. And so
I think I'm a bit of a feeler.
I knew that was coming.
If you're a thinker, you're like, I don't want to talk to you more. I don't want you to call me every single day. So knowing what your people need is part of your job as a manager, and to manage each of them based on what their unique needs are, not to do it as a blanket, what works for you.
Yeah. I'm a feeler, and Nate doesn't want to talk to me anymore.
I am more of a thinker for sure. Hey, but for the record, we did, before we started this podcast, everyone, we stopped and had conversation, and we just said, where are you? Where are you in your life? Where are you in the country? What are you up to right now? What are your kids up to right now? And we had that moment, and it felt really good.
Mm-hmm. It did.
Yeah, this is so valuable because Nate and I are, remote partners in this. He's in Denver, I'm in Miami. And we do struggle with this sometimes when we're really busy. It's like, oh my God, there's so many things we want to catch up on. And we're dear friends as well. We're dear friends and we're business partners. And sometimes there's no room in a meeting for the friendship part. It's like, if we do the friendship part, we're not going to get to that outcome, right? We got X amount of time. We know that this is going to take that full whatever's been earmarked, and we're going to have to get through that in order to be productive. But there's something missing when we don't get that human touch. And so it's really a dance. We had, you're also talking a lot about something that we know you're passionate about, which is how do you create, high performance teams? And some of these attributes, I mean, we could probably do a whole nother conversation on that. But some of these attributes that you're highlighting really are about what it takes to create high performance teams. And we talked about this with Tom Rossi at Higher Pixels, and kind of the nuance of how you do this in a remote first hybrid work world. So I really love that. I want to ask you one final question, and then we're going to take you into a speed round. We began this conversation talking about employee needs, and there's plenty of conversation around what executive needs, but not enough people are talking about what do managers need to feel fulfilled and valued. And you talk with them every single day. What
Mhm.
do they want and need now?
It's really the same thing that everyone wants, right? We're all humans, so it's all the same, right? They want to feel valued and appreciated too, which comes partially from their supervisor, from their boss, recognizing what it is that they're doing, and partially from their team members saying to their boss, right? You're awesome. I appreciate that you make space for me and my ideas. I feel so supported. I love getting to be able to ask you questions and have you, be there to, help me think through something. I really appreciate that you plan our meetings so well and you're so thoughtful about that and you're not wasting my time. Whatever it is, right? We need to, as employees, start to show more appreciation upwards. We have like
Mm,
no form for doing that. And we don't really think about the fact that our managers are doing all of this to support us. And so we can say thank you to them. So that's part of it. Everybody just wants to be appreciated. Managers also want to be supported. They want to have their boss be able to support them, to create opportunities for them to grow, to provide those resources. They want their boss to help clear the path for their team's work, right? So that when your team needs more resources to get a project done, or they need approval from a supervisor, they want their boss to be there to help smooth the way so that they don't have to be the person on that's always saying, no, we can't do it. No, we can't get this done. No, right? They don't want to be squeezed. They want their
right.
boss to be their ally in this work too. So, same things that we all want. It's just, managers want those things too.
Maybe we are going to take you into a speed round with some fun questions that you have 60 seconds per question to answer. Go with your gut and whatever's true for you. Alex, kick us off.
Okay.
Amy, your website says you live in a constant state of gratitude and constructive dissatisfaction. What is
What is that?
constructive dissatisfaction?
It is basically my way of saying that I'm never happy with anything, but it's always through the lens of because this can be better. And I believe that it's worth making better. So that's my constructive dissatisfaction is I don't like it, but I'm going to do what I can to make it better.
Awesome. Your first business venture started at age 12. It was a summer camp for kids, kindergarten to third grade. And camp is all about fun and connection and laughter and play. What lessons can we adopt, or maybe that you carried forward from those early entrepreneurial years?
Oh my gosh, you really did your research. um, I think the biggest thing for me was, and this actually relates to this last piece around constructive dissatisfaction, was that I saw an opportunity to do something differently and better, and I did it. And that
Mm,
is so empowering to realize that you have a lot more control than you might think. And that if you're unhappy with something, it's on you to start to make the change. You don't have to do it by yourself and you don't have to be the one to complete it. But if you just sit back and complain or are disappointed, that's on you to feel those feelings. But if you take the empowerment road and say, okay, like I went to summer camp, I didn't like it. I went for 3 years and I was like, this place sucks. I could do this better.
I
And
could
I
do
came
this
home
better.
and I said to my parents, I want to start a summer camp because I think I can do it better. And I think I can help other kids have a better experience than I had. And my parents supported me. And so I did it. And that's just how I've now run my life and try to help other managers do the same.
That's awesome.
4 years into massive disruption, what does the future of work mean to you now?
I feel like at this moment, thinking about the future of work, it is really about how we find integration and balance.
Mm,
Integration meaning with AI and technology into the human kind of, combination, kind of what does that look like? And balance meaning we don't want to be beings that work all the time. We want to have meaningful work, but we also want to have meaningful lives outside of work. And I think we're still trying to find that balance. So I think the future of work is really about how do we optimize for the human experience in this new world of technology and AI that is coming up, and in this new world where work is not the only thing. It's not new per se, I guess, but I think we're continuing to embrace this kind of virtual world where like work is not the only thing. I can work from wherever I want, and I have plenty of space in my life to do other things, and we're still trying to figure that out. I don't know if that was a good answer.
No, it's a fantastic answer. I saw a quote the other day from Mark Manson, who I admire a lot. He wrote the book, The Subtle Art of Not Giving an F. And his personal quote was, "The greatest superpower today is the ability to live in constant uncertainty."
Mm.
And I thought, you made me think of that. Yeah.
Yes. I love that. Beautiful quote. And so true.
There are between 100 and 200 unconscious biases. Which biases do you see, or which bias do you see the most when you're working with managers?
Oh my goodness. That is a tricky one. So I don't know if this is exactly what I see the most because I haven't really thought so deeply about this question, but it is something that I see a lot of folks struggle with, which is the spotlight effect, where they think everyone is looking at them and everything is about them all the time. That is a real challenge, right? As a manager, you think your team members are criticizing you for everything. You think your boss is criticizing you for everything. You think if you do one thing this way or that way, like everybody's paying attention, and really like, no, everyone just wants to get their work done. Everyone just wants to feel appreciated.
Yeah.
And like, no one is looking at you with such scrutiny. So I think that's
Right.
something that a lot of people need to kind of shift their mindset around and realize that everybody's the center, right? Everyone's the star of their own movie and no one's watching your movie.
Yeah, that's a great way to say it.
Mamie, your dad, a successful entrepreneur and CEO, told you every morning, have a productive day. You're a busy woman running a company, coaching, writing books, podcasting, and a mother of two. What does have a productive day mean to you now?
For me, being productive is contributing value to the world. So I see my life as being very blended. I can contribute value by being a parent. I can contribute value through my philanthropic and nonprofit activities. I can do it through my work as an entrepreneur and helping my clients. I can do it by putting out my podcast. But at the end of the day, I want to know that I did something that helped make the world a little bit better, one step in the right direction. And if I did that, then it was a productive day.
Amazing.
Ditto. Yeah.
Amazing. Mamie, we understand that good managers don't just think about their appreciative thoughts towards people, but they also express them. I've had a lot of appreciative thoughts toward you, and I want to express them. You've been fantastic in this conversation. I want to thank you for your constructive dissatisfaction with so many things that suck and your desire to make them better, especially meetings, for your steadfast effort to uplift the heroes of the workforce, to uplift managers and to help them thrive while we go through this especially messy moment, and for representing Brooklyn to the fullest. It has been such a pleasure to have you here today. Thank you for being with us.
Oh, that was so sweet. Thank you both so much, Nate and Alex. I really enjoyed this conversation. I feel so energized and so excited by kind of, everyone who's listening and what you're going to take away and putting this out into the world. And just really grateful that you had me on today.
Absolutely. Thank you for being a kindred spirit on this journey. One last question. Where is the best place for people to find you? You have a number of platforms that you're on, but where's the best one for people to find you?
I would say the easiest is probably my personal website, because from there you can get to all my other content. So that is mamieks.com, MAMIE, K as in kangaroo, S as in south.com.
Thank you.
Awesome.